So welcome everybody. I'm going to pass you now over to my colleague John.
Hello all, good morning. And as Jordan says, happy Friday. The weekend is upon us. So as Jordan says, I undertake sort of two roles. Predominantly, my first role is the very fancily titled Endpoint Assessment Development Lead. So basically, I'd look after a portfolio of apprenticeship standards and develop them from inception through to completion, and then review, etc., etc. Now, JCP was actually up and running before I joined. So when I joined, it was up and running, it was working. So I left well alone, basically. However, my hand's been forced, and we have had to make some changes. And in order to explain that, I wanted to give you a bit of a sort of history, what's happened, and a bit of background to what's happened, so that perhaps you can understand why the changes need to come about. So first and foremost, I guess to explain the way in which we do develop these right at the very beginning, any apprenticeship standard, we get the assessment plan from IFATE's website, so the Institute for Apprenticeships Technical Education. So apologies if I'm trying to teach you to suck eggs here, but that is available to anyone, any member of the public, yourself, on IFATE's website. You can download that assessment plan. And that is like our ultimate source of truth. It's basically been put together by the trailblazers that wrote the standard, in this case, Junior Content Producer. And it sets out the assessment methods, the timings, the KSBs, etc., etc. So we're bound by that. Now, in the case of Junior Content Producer, going back in time, the actual KSBs within that assessment plan and another document, which is called the Occupational Standard, which you can also get from the IFATE website, the KSBs didn't match up. It hadn't been wrote properly, basically, by the Trailblazer group. So an agreement was made with AIM's external quality assurer at the time that AIM would write its own KSBs, in effect, to cover and amalgamate these differences. So everything that's in the occupational standard and the assessment plan is covered in those KSBs that AIM wrote. But they wrote their own in order that there weren't going to be a load of KSBs that were very similar, because some of them were very similar, and there'd have been a really long list as well. Would have had more to meet. So that's the first point to make. Against that, AIM had to then write their own pass and distinction criteria to meet those KSBs. There are pass and distinction criteria in the assessment plan, but they've not been mapped against anything. They're very generic and they're really vague, to be fair. They don't allude to any of the KSBs directly. So an agreement was made with the EQA that this is what AIM would do, so that's what it did. And that's from that was produced the sort of material that you'll be using, that you'll be familiar with, and that's been working for all intents and purposes. However, we got a new external quality assurer who came along and had a look. They did an audit on all our material, and quite rightly, they asked the question, you know, what you've got, the KSBs and pass and distinction criteria you've got in your assessment material it's not the same as what's in the assessment plan. So this is where I did have some involvement. So I had to explain historically what had happened and the agreement with the previous external quality assurer. So we were given some actions ultimately by the new external quality assurer, and those actions were to use the KSBs, the knowledge, skills and behaviour that were in the assessment plan only. So that the ones that we have used that will be in the new material are on pages 7 to 12. They're mapped against each assessment method, and they are listed in pages 7 to 12 of that assessment plan. So if you haven't already, please do go onto IFATE's website, download that assessment plan, and you can start having a nosy at those. So that was the first agreement. Then because the pass and distinction criteria had been written to meet these amalgamated KSBs, some of them didn't quite map over to the new KSBs or the KSBs that were just in the assessment plan. So there might be some different pass and distinction criteria as well, which you'll be able to see when you get the new material sent out. So that kind of brings us up in regards to the changes. I should point out as well that some of the differences between the occupational standard and the assessment plan was in how criteria were listed, whether it was a knowledge, skill or behaviour. There are inconsistencies, so some of them were the same originally, but one might have been listed as a knowledge in the occupational standard and then in the assessment plan as a behaviour. So it was hard to know what to assess it as. So in view of that, an agreement was made with the current external quality assurer, and two of the KSBs that fall under the workplace observation within the assessment plan, they're going to sort of change category. So the two that those are should be listed in a document that should hopefully have been sent out to put a bit of a document together. But basically, there's a skill under the workplace observation that's worded as demonstrating how to publish web pages using markup style and sheets. That's been recategorized as a knowledge. We've been told to recategorize that as a knowledge rather than a skill. The second one, again, it's under the workplace observation. Originally it was a behavior and it's been recategorized as a skill, and that's worded as following health and safety procedures in the workplace. So that originally was a behaviour that fell under the workplace observation. It's now categorised as a skill. So that's a difference as well that you perhaps notice. Moving forward a bit, the way that we review all standards is by collecting data, basically. And that data, what it comprises of is feedback from you guys, so feedback from training providers, feedback from apprentices, feedback from employers, and indeed feedback from Jordan's team, the delivery team, and feedback from our own assessors that are assessing on it. This data is collated together, and then I conduct a thematic analysis, basically. So I'm looking for areas of, that are reoccurring throughout the feedback that we get. This is then triangulated against other external data, such as external quality assurer reports, to make sure we're meeting our obligations under those. And then from that, all this sort of data gets put together, looked at, and it drives any changes. So it's never what I'm trying to get at, it's never my opinion. It's always supported by sort of this research. And what we're looking to do, if we make changes, is make things better for everyone involved. I'm not going to make changes for the sake of making changes, basically. And believe you me, I didn't want to make any changes at this time, but my hands were tied in regards to our external quality assurer telling me I've got to. So we've got to do it. So, like I said, moving forward, what I've done, I've looked at all this data and I've put together a new, what we're going to call an apprentice pack. That will contain all the information for the apprentice and ultimately yourselves as training providers. And it's going to replace, how we had separate sort of assignment briefs for each assessment method, separate documents. It's going to replace those. It's all going to be one pack instead. So it's quite a big document, but I don't want that to put you off, because the way I've structured it into, I think it's 6 steps. So you would just look at the step that you're currently working on, and then read that bit rather than reading the entirety of the document. Obviously, when you get access to this apprentice pack, which Jordan will discuss later, it'll make quite a bit more sense. So that's basically what's coming, what's going to happen, and the changes that you can expect. Also, there might be some changes to the way in which some of the assessment methods are facilitated. So part of the feedback that I got and that I've drawn actions from, there was one in regards to the workplace observation, and we want to help apprentices have every opportunity to succeed and meet all the KSPs they need to within that workplace observation. So there's going to be a workplace observation proposal form. That basically will be for the apprentice, with support from yourselves and employer, to put together a proposal for the workplace observation, which you'll submit to AIM. We'll pass it on to an assessor. That assessor will have a look at it and they'll give you some feedback. They'll see if it, if it's going to afford that apprentice with the opportunity to meet all the KSPs, and then you can bat it back and forwards potentially for a bit. I should imagine that potentially, to start with, there might be a bit of batting backwards and forwards, but eventually, by doing this, it'll allow you as training providers to get inside the heads of our assessors and understand what they're looking for. You can then pass this on to the apprentices, and when the proposals come in, at some stage, not too far down the line, they're going to be sort of accepted straight away, basically, because you know what our assessors are then sort of looking for. So it's going to help standardise that process, like I say, and hopefully make it easier for you to understand what's happening and what our assessors are looking for. It's important for me that you can get inside our heads. So I've worked as for training providers, public and private, delivering apprenticeship standards myself. And I know one of the main things that I needed to do was understand how that endpoint assessment organisation interpreted those KSPs, how they interpreted those pass and distinction criteria. Because some of them, they leave open a lot of areas of ambiguity, and you could get three people in a room that could all interpret the same knowledge criteria very differently. And obviously at the end of the day, it's going to be that assessor and what they're looking at, and they're making those assessment decisions. So you need to understand what it is they're looking for, and we all need to be on the same wavelength. So what I'm trying to do is set up expectations all the way through the process with the material. So anyway, to summarise, we're going to have a workplace observation proposal that can get battered backwards and forwards till everyone's happy with it. And like I said, the idea of that is to give that apprentice every opportunity to meet all the KSPs and succeed in that observation. So that's one change. Now, the other change is going to be in regards to the sort of portfolio that's produced. So in the material that you'll get later on, there's mention of 2 portfolios, but please don't panic. So there's something that I've called a gateway portfolio, which is what you'll be completing and putting together and helping those apprentices put together throughout the programme. So this is all pre-gateway stuff. It's all the evidence that they're collecting, etc., and putting together. And that evidence can be, it can be written evidence, it could be websites that they've worked on, etc. It can be anything. So that's the gateway portfolio. We actually don't need anything from you in regards to the gateway portfolio, and I'm sure you all have sort of online portfolios, etc., that apprentices and yourselves utilise to add stuff into, and that's fine. What I've put together is a gateway portfolio mapping document. So that mapping document will basically just enable an apprentice to map their evidence against all the KSPs that are covered within this apprenticeship standard, and it'll act as a bit of a skills gap analysis. Basically, it might be useful for when it comes to towards the endpoint assessment period in deciding whether they are actually ready for endpoint assessment, etc. Just look to see if there's any gaps. It could help you as trainers to look for the gaps and understand where any areas you might need to focus on. However, you don't have to use that. The apprentice doesn't have to use that. It's just there as a tool, as a bit of an extra tool to use if needed. So that's the gateway portfolio. The other portfolio is what I've called the showcase portfolio. And the showcase portfolio pertains only to the professional discussion assessment method. So within that professional discussion, what should happen is that the showcase portfolio should add context to that professional discussion for that apprentice, well, for each apprentice. So if you think that assessor has never met that apprentice before, so it's what they're going to do. We're going to ask you and the apprentice to complete a mapping document again, just against the KSBs that fall within the professional discussion, and submit the evidence that falls against that, so that the assessor can review that evidence. So it's not marked per se, and it doesn't go towards the assessment grading. But what it allows that assessor to do is get to know that apprentice, understand the area of content production that they're working in. It also allows them to prepare a lot better for the professional discussion, because they can prepare their own questions and choose questions from a question bank that are appropriate to that particular apprentice and their assessment needs. So it's going to be used to drive that professional discussion. And then it'll very possibly be referred to within the professional discussion as well. It'll help open up areas for discussion. Again, this is something that we need to do. We need to give structure to the professional discussion, and we've been told, it's an action we've been given by our external quality assurer, that we need to give a bit more structure and guidance to assessors. So that will be the showcase portfolio. So it's only the professional discussion. You will be required to submit this at Gateway. Okay. So moving forward again.
Hello.
Gary, can you put yourself on with that? Thank you. I'd like to open the floor up a bit and ask you as training providers to help us and help me. Because like I've said, it's very important that I get feedback from training providers so we understand what's working, etc. And then when we conduct our review periods, we can factor it all in. So when you actually get this apprentice pack, if you can have a nosy through that at some point, I've put a deadline on the document that should have been sent out, 25th of February. That's because I can look at it again then and collate all any comments together. But what I'd like you to do, if it's possible and if you've got the time, is have a look and give us feedback on what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent in the actual apprentice pack. But if you could tell me in terms of, but for you, what's missing, what do you need to know, what hasn't been covered? If there's anything that confused you, tell us how it confused you. Also as important, tell us if there's anything good, what you feel we should absolutely must keep, that we can't get rid of from there. And then any further comments or notes. What I can potentially do then is after the 25th of February, I can collate any feedback that's been sent in. So if you just send it to the AIM assessment email, I can collate all that, and I can look to put together a bit of a frequently asked questions document against that, and hopefully answer any questions that people may have, etc. And then we can circulate those frequently asked questions to all the training providers on this standard. Also, something I forgot to mention, so apologies, what you can expect in the apprentice pack is, in order to help everyone be on the same wavelength and understand the KSBs and understand what we're looking at, I got our assessors to undertake an exercise whereby they wrote expansions of the KSBs. So basically what that'll do, these expansions will be in the apprentice pack, so you will be able to see them. And what I'm hoping they do is help assessors to standardize their assessment decisions, so all assessors are making very similar decisions and looking for the same sort of stuff. It'll help you as training providers understand what our assessors are looking for, so you can get inside their heads. You can then go away and put together your curriculums, your syllabus appropriately to make sure you're covering everything that's needed to be covered, and what might crop up during the assessments. And obviously it'll help the apprentices to get to see those expansions and get an understanding of what assessors are actually looking for. So in some of the expansions, we've given examples. So I'll try and give you an example. I'm not saying this is in there, but just to give you some idea of what I'm talking about. If, for example, a knowledge criteria states that an apprentice should have an up-to-date knowledge of software systems. What software systems? Yeah, it's a bit vague, isn't it? That very open to interpretation. So in cases like that, I've asked the assessors to give some examples of software systems that they'd consider to be up to date. Now, obviously, software systems change very fast. And so what the lists will never be, there'll never be an exhaustive list. It's not a comprehensive list of what, you know, they must mention these types of software. It's just to give you an idea, because all apprentices will have very different jobs while they're on this standard. The types of software that might be appropriate to one apprentice might not be appropriate to another apprentice. So we can't give an exhaustive, definitive list. So just bear that in mind. It's never a definitive, you've got to mention these particular bits of software. It's just as an example to give you an idea. But hopefully, like I say, it's all about setting up those expectations. And while I've been developing this, my mantra has been assessment with no surprises. We don't want any surprises in that assessment. We want apprentices and yourselves to understand exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and what to expect. So it's about trying to set up expectations at every part of the process and ensuring it's all followed through like that. So those are the expansions that you can expect. So please, I'm going to ask you to give me feedback on those as well, if you would. Because to be fair, some of the expansions have literally just sort of reworded, or they're very similar to the KSOB. And that's because the answers I got from the assessors was there's not much to explain, or they didn't feel there were much to explain. However, if you feel there is something to explain, please tell us, please come back to it, and we could look at rejigging the expansions and telling you what you need to know against that knowledge, skill, or behaviour. So if you're, you know, like I said, if you're looking at a knowledge and the expansion, and you've still got areas of ambiguity and you're still unsure, feed that back to us and we can look at addressing that. Okay, so I'd like to ask you to do that as well, please, if that's okay. Again, so it's looking at causes of confusion, what we can do to help, and thoughts on possible interpretations of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. Then hopefully we can, like I say, get something put together and address those areas of ambiguity for you. One final proposal I'd like to make, and it's an idea I had in regards to mock assessments, and the idea that I had was to help you as training providers put on mock assessments that would mimic exactly what's going to sort of happen in those live assessments. So we're not only preparing apprentices against the KSBs, but we're preparing them in regards to the environment that they're going to be immersed in. Because we don't want them to be uncomfortable, because that could be a disadvantage within that assessment environment. So the proposal I've got for people, so I'm going to look for 10 training providers to start with, and 1 delegate from each training provider. And part of my other role, which I haven't mentioned yet at AIM, is as Anne, put my teeth back in, an assessor manager. And then I've got brackets training. So I basically deliver training, I deliver induction training to new assessors in regards to assessment and assessment practices. So I'm going to offer to train you, the training providers, exactly as I train our assessors, so that you will understand how our assessors get trained and what's going off in their heads when they are delivering live assessments. You can then facilitate really good mock assessments potentially. I will give you access to all the mark sheets, etc. So again, assessment with no surprises, and you can use those mark sheets within your mock assessments. Yeah, so that should all then drive it. So it's a real to life assessment. It's a bit more than a mock assessment. You're putting them in that exact environment that they will be submersed in. So that's a proposal to you, like I say. And so we're looking for expressions of interest. If you can, again, email those through or pop them in the chat. No date for that yet, I must add, because I don't know whether people will be interested or not, basically. So I've not penciled a date in, but we can look at dates later when I've got a sort of list. I will record the session as well. Obviously, there's a lot of training providers on this one, so I might not be able to get around doing that with all the training providers, but you will get access to the video. obviously from the knowledge you gain from that, you can then pass that on to apprentices, and it should put you in a better place to be able to explain what's going to happen in those live assessments, as well as facilitate some really good mock assessments as well. I'm going to pass you back over to Jordan now so that she can go through the logistics of these sort of changes in regards to when to sort of submit proposals, how to submit them, etc., etc. And then I think we'll take questions after Jordan's done her bit. So thanks for your attention, everyone.
Thanks, John. I'm just going to do a really quick catch up because I know a couple of people have had some issues getting on this morning, so I do apologise. Just to recap, what my colleague John has just been going through was that document that I sent you all this morning, just to clarify on what the changes are and why we've had to make them. So if you have a read through the document and if you've got any questions, do let us know, but the session is being recorded, so you can look back at the beginning if there are any sections that you've missed. The biggest thing to mention is around the knowledge, skills and behaviours. In our materials are going to be linked directly to the assessment plan only moving forwards, and they can be found on pages 7 to 12 on the assessment plan. So we've referred a lot this morning to this apprentice pack, which is going to be one singular document which has all of our assignment briefs that are going to be assessment briefs for moving forwards, examples of how to complete the documentation and guidance around how EP is going to work. That document is going to be sent to the main contact for your provider by the 4th of February, so next Friday. You'll have access, by next Friday, you'll have access to this apprentice pack. And if you are not the contact that we have on our system to get their communications, do just drop me a quick email and I can make sure that you're added to the mailing list for this document. Within that, there are a few mentions that we had around gateway requirements. So the first being around this workplace observation proposal. So logistics wise, what we're asking is for apprentices to complete this workplace proposal and submit it at least 2 weeks prior to their expected gateway date. And that will then be reviewed by the assessor and say they'll have a look and just to see whether the plan the apprentice has made has got the potential to meet the knowledge, skills and behaviours required for the workplace observation. Again, it's just a tool of support really, so that we're giving the apprentice the best possible opportunity to pass the assessments. Like I say, if the apprentices can submit that to our assessment inbox 2 weeks prior to their gateway date, and then we would send out an approval from the assessor, or we'll come back and forth with feedback when necessary. The second element of Gateway that we are adding on is the showcase portfolio. And again, it's not, it doesn't have to be separate evidence to what's in their Gateway portfolio that they bring on board, that they do on programme, apologies. It's a snippet of the best pieces of evidence that link to the professional discussion, knowledge, skills and behaviours. So in submission wise to that, what we're asking is that when you upload the Gateway evidence, so along with the Gateway form and the level 2 maths and English certificates, is that we either get access of a link directly to that apprentice's showcase portfolio. So whether that be WordPress, Google Drive, WeTransfer, you know, it doesn't have to be any specific system. The only thing we do ask is that it can't be OneDrive, one file, or any e-portfolio platform, purely down to the fact the assessors don't have access to your provider's area of that. So it just makes some complications. So what we're asking is if the apprentice can draw their showcase portfolio together, ready for their EPA, and that gets submitted either via a link directly to our MIA system, or you can upload the documents that they want to submit to the MIA system as well. So it'll be a case of finding which way is working best for you and your apprentices, whether that be you upload the documents directly or whether a link is uploaded. If there's any further questions on that, don't be afraid to contact your delivery officers because they'll be on board to help guide you through these changes and when they're necessary. So in terms of when these changes come in, what we're saying is on this new apprentice pack and this new moving forwards, It's going to be live for any apprentices going through Gateway from the 20th of April this year. If you already have apprentices before the 20th of April, they will be running on the same process that we have been doing previously, so the same materials, everything like that. If you want to move through sooner by doing the workplace planner, the showcase portfolio, we can do, but it's just from the 20th of April, it will be mandatory that we go through this process. Another element of it that we are updating is around the set test of the assessment methods, and it's more around how the apprentices have access to the brief. And this is going to be done directly through our proctor exam system for that 3-hour preparation stage of the set test. And what will happen is when they log in and do the security check, so that'll be things like sharing screen, making sure that we've got access to their cameras so we can proctor their exam, they'll have a link directly to the brief and it will come up automatically. Whereas before they had to open up a document as well as proctor exam, it's now all been interlinked. There will be options for the apprentices to see an example of the brief in this new style pack, so they'll be able to do some mocks based on or some examples of how the assessment is going to look on their screen, so there's no surprises when we get to their endpoint assessment. And last but not least is around the delivery of the junior content producer. So any provider that's been with us pre-COVID, everything was done face-to-face. Any providers that have come on board since March 2020, everything has been remote because that's been allowed with the flexibilities that the Institute have put in place. Moving forward, what the Institute have done is they've created a flexibility framework, which means that there is some movement in the assessment plans on what an endpoint assessment can deliver. And the biggest one this affects is the workplace observation. So the Institute have stated that any assessment plan where they have an observation or a practical assessment should return to face-to-face assessments. And the set test and the professional discussion can remain to be remote. So this comes into action from the 1st of April this year. So any apprentices that you put through endpoint assessment from the 1st of April onwards, their workplace observation will be expected to be face-to-face. Now, as an industry, I understand that this isn't the best news that we could have had because it's not going to be suitable for all apprentices. So as an EPO, we have already gone back to the Institute and the EQA providers to state that some apprentices in this industry don't have offices to work at anymore. They work from home permanently, so remote assessments are going to be requested. So the process at the moment is that for every apprentice that wants to go through a remote assessment, we as the EPO have to get approval from the EQA provider to do the assessments remotely. Now, that's not ideal for any of us. So we have gone back to the EQAs to say, is there a way that we can have a pre-approved list of reasons as to why an assessment could need to be remote? Example, they work from home permanently and we cannot be sending assessors to an apprentice's work home to do the assessment because it's just not suitable. In that case, what we would then do is you would have to request for it to be remote via our reasonable adjustments, and then we would be able to approve that if it's deemed necessary. So like I say, that comes into action from the 1st of April. So again, any assessments that are booked in for February and March aren't affected. They can remain to be remote or they can be face-to-face. Any that move from 1st of April onwards are expected to be face-to-face. I've just seen a comment about whether it can be at the training provider. At the moment, they are asking that it's back into their normal working place, so it would be their employer site. Now, if the EQA allow the venue to be different, if the apprentice is working from home, then I'm hoping that that could kind of be our backup plan, that if they don't allow it to be remote, can it be done at the training provider? So unfortunately, I don't have a yes or no answer, but that is the situation at the moment. The Institute are changing things as the times change. So at the moment, February, March can stay how we've been doing it before, so remote, or they can choose to have it face to face from the 1st of April onwards. 1st of April onwards, it will be face to face. If you have any immediate concerns about your apprentices and their working situation with that being face to face, please contact us, because then that's further evidence that we can supply to the EQAs to say that we need some sort of boundary of where we can use remote assessments for the workplace observation. So that's update wise from us. Like I say, this apprentice pack that you'll be getting will be sent to you by next Friday, the 4th. But if not, I'm going to open the floor up now. So if anybody has any questions, please unmute yourself and ask away.
Hello. Hiya. Hello,
Oh.
I'm from PA Training. I just wanted to ask, I did pop it in the chat, the reference tables, will they be embedded within the apprentice packs for us to see straight away when they get those, or when will we get access to those?
I did pop a response in the chat.
Oh,
Actually,
apologies. Sorry, I was taking.
No, it's all right. While you've asked the question, other people are probably thinking the same thing. So the apprentice pack, I should have explained this anyway.
That's all right.
The apprentice pack is going to be one sort of big Word document, but then it's going to come with a zip file with separate forms in that the apprentice will need to fill in and submit back to us. Within the apprentice pack, there's going to be signposts to the forms. So now complete form 1, gateway review form, etc., etc. So then they'll open up the zip file. Yeah.
I've plenty of access to those referencing tables ahead of, especially if we've got to complete them 2 weeks ahead of gateway, etc.
Yeah, they will be in the zip file, but you'll be signposted by the apprentice pack to the correct form.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Just to clarify as well, what we'll do is when the apprentice gets their confirmation email and their welcome email, they'll also be sent the pack as well. So they will have a direct copy from us, but also you can supply it to them as well.
Great, brilliant. Thank you.
Any more for any more? Cool.
Hello.
Hello.
I just missed. I had problems logging in, so sorry. I just missed the first bit. So, sorry I was late. Want to apologise for that. But I don't know. It was sending me around in a circle. But thanks for sending me the link. And I don't know. I missed the first bit, so I'll watch the recording unless there's something that you can, and I'll read the paperwork unless there's something you could recap on now that I may have missed in the first 10-15 minutes.
I'll tell you, we've still got 20 minutes left, so I'll try and do a bit of a succinct recap over it, and it might help other people as well. Anyway, unless just in case, because I don't want us to go over and run out of time. Has anyone else got any other questions that are more directed? And then if not, I can sort of do a bit of a succinct recap.
No, just thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you. So if no one else has got any sort of direct questions, I'll do a short recap then. So what I started with was some of the history. I'm not going to go into the details of why things were done like they were. Obviously that will be on the video. But basically the way stuff's developed is we are directed by the assessment plan on the I-FATE website. That is like our source or ultimate truth. That is the starting point for all development work. And basically we're bound by what's in there. We have to do what it says. We have to run the assessment methods that it states, the timings, etc., etc. However, that said, the junior content producer assessment plan and another document called the occupational standard, there was mismatches in the KSBs, there was mismatches into how things were categorized, whether it were a knowledge, a skill or behavior. So historically, AIM had an agreement about how we'd do things with one external quality assurer. Along came a new external quality assurer that told us to do things differently, basically. So we got some actions. The actions were to assess against only the KSBs as they are in the assessment plan. I think it's pages 7 to 12 off the top of my head. So that's one of the things that's changed. So the wording of the KSBs will have changed, although it will still cover the same stuff, as daft as that sounds. It's all sort of semanticals. It's just the wording that will have changed. But please have a look at those. So grab a copy of the assessment plan off the i-FATE website, which everyone's got access to, and have a look at pages 7 to 12 and have a look at those KSBs in there. That's what we'll be assessing against. And then, as I explained, part of the review process for all apprenticeship standards that Endpoint assesses on is that we periodically review all the material, make sure it's working, make sure it's still up to date, etc., etc. And it's reviewed against loads of feedback, basically, that we collect from all internal and external stakeholders. We conduct a bit of thematic analysis, etc. And then any actions from EQAs or i-FATE or Ofqual, for example, are taken into account as well. The changes that that's brought about, you're going to get a nice, it's a lot of it's sort of, we've made the material look a lot better, basically. So our marketing, I've got our marketing team involved, and they've put together, you know, a really good format for me to insert the content into. So it's going to look prettier for starters, but everything's going to be in one pack that we call the apprentice pack. You'll still get all the material in there, such as the assignment briefs, the sort of walkthroughs of each assessment, how to prepare for Gateway, but there's going to be a lot more guidance in it. It's a lot more detailed for you. Each assessment will be given before, during and after from an apprentice's perspective. So what they need to be doing before, during and after, or what they can expect before, during and after. Then at the bottom in the apprentice pack, I've put some appendices in, which will be all sort of example materials. So examples of completed portfolio grids, example questions that might be asked in the professional discussion, all bits and bats like that to help people prepare, basically. That's probably what you missed, I think. Probably didn't get any much further than that. So I'll leave it there, unless has anyone got any other questions at all?
Yeah, I have a question. The showcase portfolio that you're discussing,
yes,
what's that weighted against as far as the qualifications concerned?
It's not taken. It's used to drive the professional discussion. So
right.
You'd map any evidence against the professional discussion KSBs only, but the mapping document will drive you to do that anyway.
Right. So it's additional material for the professional discussion.
It shouldn't actually be any additional material. So if your apprentices are putting together, you know, show reels and collecting evidence of what they're doing in the job, and mapping that against all the KSBs within the entirety of the standard, they're just then going to pick the best pieces that map against the professional discussion. So they're going to collate it more than create it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's the idea. And then what that'll do, it's going to make the professional discussion a lot better. It's going to set it up better, and it's going to afford a better opportunity for all apprentices to get a pass or a distinction, basically, because it allows that assessor to get to know that apprentice and choose questions that are appropriate to that apprentice's workplace and to their assessment needs. So it should improve things, I'm hoping. Does that answer your question, Gary? Yeah,
that's great. That's fine.
Thank you. Cool.
And just to add to that as well, also based off feedback from apprentices, it's a good tool for them to have that confidence going into the professional discussion, because they know what pieces of evidence that they've got towards that criteria, so they can go and have access to it during their professional discussion to refer back to, so that they've got it with them to use as a bit of guidance for them as well.
Yeah. And again, you know, the assessor may refer to it in your portfolio, showcase portfolio. You've got this bit of it. Can you tell me where the ideas came from? It just helps people to talk. They've got something to talk about and to look at.
So talking about the criteria overall, we're hitting problems with certain businesses whereby they are quite focused on video. A lot of companies that do video are picking up the courses and do it in photography and that. So looking at the criteria, there's you've got your web criteria in there. is how does that stand if they don't meet that web criteria for the whole course?
Okay, so first off, Gary, they're not our criteria, because it's the criteria that were written by the Trailblazer group that developed this standard. So the bottom line is we can't take it out. It's in there. It's got to stay in there. So the idea of all apprenticeships is basically the apprentice might be in a certain job that only does certain aspects from the standard, but they might not be in that job forever. And the Trailblazers that have written this standard have decided that these KSBs, it's person spec for all intents and purposes, that the ultimate content producer should be able to display these KSBs. And don't forget, they could move job where they're doing something a bit different, and then they would need what they wasn't doing in that other place of employment. Do you know what I mean? So we're not actually preparing them necessarily just to do the job they're currently in. We're preparing them to be content producers. And when we say that, yeah, they've met a pass is a really good thing. What we're saying is that they're consistently competent at meeting all these KSBs, and they can do the bloody job. They can do it well. You know what I mean? So what I would suggest, like I said, I've worked for training providers myself. I've delivered private and state on apprenticeship standards. Now, I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, but the way I used to approach this to set up my sort of training, I'd individualise it for each apprentice. So I'd do what we call a skills scan, and I'd look what they were doing in their job role and think, fine, they're going to learn that in the job role. And then me as the training provider, I'd plug the gaps. I'd focus on those things that they weren't doing in the job role and train towards those a bit more than the things they were doing in the job role. I would also train against the stuff they were doing in the job role. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So companies that don't have websites, I'm looking at flexibility for us delivering it. Would we sort of be able to do that as a proposal and the learner create a website as a proposal for the learner if the company have no way of actually doing or using websites?
No, this is where it gets a bit ambiguous, and we're bound by that assessment plan again, because it states in the assessment plan that it can't be sort of simulated that stuff. It's got to be. This is for the observation. It's got to be what they do in the job.
So I've got to demonstrate a live company website.
Yeah, and it's really hard because basically, you know, they need to do that in the job. What falls under the workplace observation.
Right.
And we can't be sort of simulating that. It can't be stuff they've done for you. Although if it's knowledge and you're doing the training around that, that's fine, because they just need to demonstrate knowledge, not that they can actually do something with that knowledge.
It's the real issue.
Yeah. It's don't forget as well, they don't actually need to meet everything to get a pass and a distinction. So bear that in mind. But sometimes you might have to consider, is this the appropriate standard for this apprentice? Do you know what I mean? There might actually be a more appropriate apprenticeship standard for them to be on. But that's a call, you know, for yourself, the employer, the apprentice themselves, I guess.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't be much more assistance on that, Gary. Sorry, Jordan.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify the fact that, you know, with this standard is one of the older assessment plans, which means that we do have that little caveat that they don't need to meet every criteria in order to pass. It's advised that they get the opportunity to meet as many as possible, because then they have a better opportunity at passing. But again, like I said, you know, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head for this one, but they don't need all of them to pass. So it's maybe focusing on the ones that they definitely can do and seeing how many criteria that hits, and then working on that skills gap, and looking at how the employee can assist you guys on that as well.
It is. It's a tough one to call, you know, but I know if we go to the EQA and sort of say, look, this person doesn't do video in their job role, can we leave that out? They're going to say no, because, you know, they're potentially just going to come back and say that they're on the wrong apprenticeship. They shouldn't have been doing this apprenticeship. It's hard. It's an awkward one.
It's such a broad standard as well, isn't it? So
yeah,
the different contexts that an apprentice can be in is so massive. So yeah, not every criteria is suitable, but thankfully on this one they don't need to meet all of the criteria to pass.
Any more questions? Cool.
Well, once we send you the document, if you do have any more questions, do contact your delivery officer or contact the assessment inbox, and we'll be able to go through some of those questions for you. Like I say, you'll have access to the document by next Friday, and we'll start having a conversation about getting that training set up for mock assessments. And if you can once you get the document, have a look through the expansions in those areas so we can get your feedback and let you guys have a say as well. Because it's all of us collectively together that want that end goal of the apprentice passing. So anything we can do to support. But thank you for your time, guys. It's been really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you all. Take care and have a good weekend.